Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Bylaws Review Subcommittee for Thursday before the long weekend. Please stand if you're able for the acknowledgement of traditional lands. We acknowledge we're hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Thank you. May I please have a mover of the agenda? Thank you. Give me a second. Trustee King, seconded by Trustee McLean. All in favor, just show of hands or please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Seeing and hearing none. Are there any delegations? No delegations today, so we'll move on to a staff report 5.1, which is hopefully here for approval, and that is the attendance and participation in meetings policy. We've had a couple kicks at the can at it, and I'll go to Associate Director Pon online. Did you want to begin?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thank you very much for all the feedback that we've had in discussions. It was very fruitful, and Vitaly and his team have further updated the draft policy for your consideration. So I'll ask Vitaly to lead you through some of the changes there. There are not many changes, but I hopefully these changes have captured the subcommittee's wishes. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Associate Director, and through you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Attendance and participation in board and committee meetings policy. This is the new proposed title. Based on the discussions that we had at this committee last time, we made some revisions. If you look quickly at Section 3 definitions, we included definition of business day. This is consistent with the complaint protocol and the board member code of conduct. Other revisions are relatively minor, just wordsmithing, but the key component is in Section 622, where we explain that reference to other member as applicable. So in Section 622, we explain that it would be chair, vice chair, or if the board has no vice chair, by another member of the board. This is also relatively minor. And the substance is in Section 637, which is on page 10 of the agenda package, 637. So if you remember, the bulk of the discussion was around providing requests for participation electronically and when that should be done, at what point. And we believe the discussion was around normal circumstances when trustee is planning to participate electronically and therefore could submit that request in advance and receive approval in advance, but then circumstances when it's unexpected. So the language we included is for your consideration. We included 2 business days for planned scheduled events. We did not include anything specific, 1 hour, 3 hours, 5 hours in cases of emergencies. So it's still kind of open, but just to remind that under the legislation, both the request and an approval should be received prior to beginning of the meeting. So I believe these are major changes that we made after the last discussion. And with that, back to you, Associate Director, in case you would like to add anything. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing further to add, but we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? May I pass the chair, Trustee McLean?
Please proceed.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this. I have no changes to the policy, but I am wondering in the context section, when this report flows through to governance and policy, if there should be some mention made of in terms of next steps, procedures to accompany this that will provide more specific details of who to contact, how to contact, so that, because those questions will come up, what if I have an unintended, so it would just be good to signal in advance and be proactive that once this is approved by committee and board, staff have already begun to work on procedures, whatever, which would be brought to the board for information and to answer any questions before this becomes implemented. I just think that would be positive, and it could avoid a lot of, but what happens now, what happens, at the committee meeting. So those are my comments. Thank you very much. And I'll take back the chair. Anyone online? Trustee Williams.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Yes, those precisely captured the questions I had. I just want to thank staff for really capturing well the comments and feedback that was received. Reading through the policy the draft policy as it is, I think it's very succinct. The language is clear. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank staff for that. Speaking to trustees' comments about, the procedures and more specifics to follow, that would be very helpful. In particular, the section around the other member, the other board member that could be notified. It would be really helpful to get clarity around that process, like who and how and all of that. And just clarification as to the delegation of the chair's responsibility in receiving the notice and delegating that to another member. So those were my comments and questions. Thank you, through the chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or clarification? If not, may I please have a mover to approve? Thank you, trustee. I think I saw trustee King, then trustee McLean. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And again, I echo the committee's comments about thanking staff for this great work. So now we're into further discussion of the board bylaws. Just for my colleagues' information, I did get an update. Unfortunately, only 9 trustees submitted the survey. In total, 9. And I know that one of them was me. So I don't know if one of them was another committee member. So I found it disappointing because we did try to encourage people and there were a couple of reminders. That being said, par for the course, it probably won't matter because there'll still be a lively discussion once something is in front of the board. So I'm not concerned that there won't be multiple opportunities to hear input and hopefully arrive at some consensus. Associate Director, I'm not sure where we left off. I want to move forward. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. And I do want to thank the trustees who did submit a response to the survey. The survey responses we did receive were actually quite fulsome and very helpful and informative. And the policy team will continue to do its analysis and will be planning to present the results at the next meeting. In the meantime, Policy Officer Vitaly Plotnikov will continue with a slide presentation on the other topics that we were planning to take care of. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Last time we ended our discussion on the speaking time. We had opportunity to discuss speaking time for trustees. And the second part is with regard to speaking time for staff, CAC members at board and committee meetings. So we looked at our bylaws and looked at bylaws of other school boards. And essentially, there is no rules except with maybe with Toronto Catholic, which says if asked by the chair, staff have 5 minutes to speak to report. So 5 minutes for staff at Toronto Catholic. Other than that, no limits, no limitations, no boundaries and rules. So I guess for your consideration, if trustees would like to recommend any rules, that's the question for consideration. Madam Chair, would you like me to go through the whole list or we will go one by one?
Would you do me as a favor and go through the whole list so we know the scope of what our conversation is, and then we'll come back and do slide by slide. I think that might be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do that. So if we move to this next slide, we have, this is with regard to end debate motion or call the question motion. Requirements are somewhat similar to TDSBs. If you look at Toronto Catholic, 2/3 majority, once all members wishing to speak have spoken once. Peel, out of order at committee, this is exactly what we have in our bylaws, and 2/3 majority at board. York, 2/3 majority, once all members wishing to speak have spoken. There is no kind of difference distinguished. It's not distinguished whether it's committees or board, perhaps both. Halton, 2/3 majority. Again, not sure if it's just the board or both. As I said, in our case, it's out of order at board meetings, and for committees, only after all members who wish to speak have done so once, and 2/3 majority of members present. So it's not a simple majority. And when we looked at the parliamentary rules and procedures, it was emphasized that speaking at a meeting, it's one of the rights, even expectation for trustees. So to cut discussion is essentially a big deal. Therefore, it's elevated. It's not just a simple majority, it's 2/3. But you remember we talked about the speaking time, especially at committees. So if we properly balance those rules, how many times person can speak, then apparently, probably the end debate motion could have a lower threshold. That's just for your consideration. If we can move to the next slide, please. So this is voting on motion to receive. We had this discussion at the last round when the bylaws were reviewed. It was a heated discussion. Some folks felt that a vote is not necessary, and the argument is this is information just for receipt. So as soon as it's provided to you, you've received it, or it has been submitted to you. So to vote on that and to say I did not receive almost kind of doesn't make sense. The other argument is it's a sign of acknowledgement that yes, indeed we received, we read this, we perhaps discussed this. So if you look at other school boards, it looks that Toronto Catholic, they have majority votes similar to the TDSB's practice. At Peel, it looks that the chair would just ask for objections and vote on that, and other school boards did not indicate any rules around that. So the next item is extending meeting time. So in terms of meeting times, Toronto Catholic, they have a soft stop after 4 hours of meeting, and then majority vote is required to extend. Peel, soft stop at 11 p.m. and then they can extend. No hard stop though. Same with York, same with Dufferin Peel Catholic. Halton, soft stop at 10 p.m. and then motion to extend. And just to remind that TDSB's bylaws, we said that soft stop is 11 p.m. and then 2/3 majority is required to extend, but the hard stop is 11:59. Next slide, please. Thank you. The next one is notice of motion and criteria to ensure the notice of motion is not significantly amended when it comes forward as a motion. So I guess the issue here is that notice of motion is required to bring a motion to board or committee floor. Sometimes the motion or advance notice gets changed somewhere in between, or sometimes even very close to the meeting when it's supposed to be discussed. And in this case, the whole purpose is is challenged in terms of people did not have time to get prepared for that discussion. Certain information perhaps was not collected and analyzed. So the suggestion, or I guess the question, is whether trustees would like to introduce certain criteria or requirements in terms of keeping the notice of motion language consistent with the final motion when it gets discussed, or if there is a need to change, then perhaps it should be a new submission, a new notice of motion submitted. So that's the issue for your consideration. Next slide, please. This is the next one is criteria regarding number of delegations and time limits. If you look at the other school boards, it seems that 10 is the maximum number of delegations that school boards typically hear at their meetings. Dufferin and Halton have less, 5 and 6. In terms of TDSB, we do not have a number. So there is a language that if the chair feels that there are too many delegations, then a special committee meeting might be considered. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because delegates usually come to meeting when that item is going to be discussed at the committee. So with that, we are slightly off in terms of we don't have any specific number on the delegations. And in terms of time, speaking time, we're probably roughly around average. We have 5 minutes per delegation and then 3 minutes per trustee for clarification questions. And if you look at other school boards, they have roughly 5 or 3 minutes timelines as well. Next slide, please. The next one is delegation format, in-person, virtual, and/or written. It looks, well, TDSB, we allow in-person, virtual, and written delegations, same as Toronto Catholic. Peel, in-person or virtual. York, the same as us. Halton did not specify, and Dufferin, in-person or written. I think we can move to the next one because the last 3 are connected. It's all about delegations. So the next one is anonymous delegations, whether or not anonymous delegations should be permitted. All school boards we looked at, they require names, so anonymous are not permitted, same as TDSB. And the final slide is with regard to delegations in private sessions. In cases, let's say, when delegate requests a delegation in private or in closed session. Toronto Catholic allows, Peel not, York Region yes, Dufferin yes, Halton no. We under our bylaws, it's permissible. That's it, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we'll now go back to the first slide, which is the speaking time for staff. And I'd like to try to do this a little bit more informally. So maybe just go around the table and then online so people have a chance to comment and build. And then if you want to come back a second time because you hear other people's, we'll do that. So on this one, Trustee King, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, through you, Chair. I haven't felt that this has been an issue in the time that I've been here. I don't feel that staff have been abusive about time. I feel that we've been able to get the information that we need. So I would be a little bit hesitant, I think, to have any formal restrictions here. In terms of the CACs, kind of similar. We haven't heard from as many of them this year, but again, the timing hasn't been an issue for me. Maybe it would be helpful for them just to have some parameters for their own planning, to know that they have, 15 minutes of time or 10 minutes or whatever it is. That might just help them frame up what they want to share. But I'm open to hearing what some others feel on this.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Trustee McLean and then I'll come back to you, Trustee Hastings. Trustee McLean, if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair. Yeah, I see certainly at our board meetings and our committee meetings, I have absolutely no interest in restricting staff's ability to communicate with us. We ask them a question. I want all of what they want to share. In terms of the CACs, it's been my experience that they work in conjunction when they're setting up the agendas, that they work in conjunction with the community member chair and try to deal with the agenda. And so if a staff report has been allotted 10 minutes or 15 minutes or a specific time, then I think there should be an expectation that they don't try to take over the meeting and go beyond what was agreed upon in the agenda. But suggesting, I think that's for the committee to decide, depending on what their agenda is, the amount of things they're discussing each month, that might vary kind of thing. It might be 10 minutes this meeting because we got a lot of things to talk about, but the next one, it could be 20 minutes because there's not as many things on it. So I think that's up to them to decide. But I do think once they've decided, then I think there should be an expectation that staff would honor that and come and, be within the expected, agreed upon amount of time that had been allocated for them.
Thank you very much. Because you're in the room, Trustee Hastings, do you have any comments? Yeah. Okay, please make your comments.
Maybe this much.
No
but-
problem. Any feeling about this?
Okay, I'm looking at your structure right now, which it gives you 5 minutes. I don't see any reason to pull it off and take it apart and put it back together in something like I see in 3 minutes. 5 minutes is fine. It's very nice for staff. It's very nice for the trustees as well.
Thank you. And then I'll go to the committee member online, Trustee Williams, and then Trustee Dawson and Trustee Arts. Please go ahead. Trustee Williams.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. With regard to the staff speaking time, I totally agree with my colleagues. I haven't seen any issue there during the time I've been here at the board, and would really appreciate the fulsome responses from staff. So I think leaving that open, I would agree. With regard to the CACs, I know when CACs bring recommendations to committee, typically it's the chair or co-chair of the CAC, and they've had ample opportunity, like no limitation on the amount of time that they can present their report. I think setting some kind of expectation might be helpful. I would like to hear fully from the CACs when they bring their recommendations, but the presentation of the report itself, if it could be, done within 5-10 minutes would be the absolute maximum. But I think 5 minutes is reasonable. and then that ample opportunity for trustees to ask questions and they respond, so that they don't, we're managing time, but there's no time pressure per se.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. So those are my initial comments.
Thank you
And
very much.
and the only other thing I'll add to you, Madam Chair, is the consideration of those time limits, speaking time limits at committee. Yeah, I just like mulling that over, because I think on limited amount of time to come back makes it difficult to manage the meetings. So those are my initial comments. Thank you, through the chair.
Thank you very much. Trustee Trustee Williams spoke. So Trustee Arts and then Trustee Dawson. Any comments?
Yeah, I don't find that staff agreed. I don't find staff time is like, I don't find they're not dominating the meeting. They tend to be concise. With CACs, I think establishing a set of guidelines for them might be good. Like, 5 minutes might be hard for them to get their idea across, but 10 minutes is reasonable. And then the time for questions from trustees, like that they understand that we have a full meeting to manage. I think most do, but I'm not sure. Like, I would think guidance would be helpful. I'm not sure about limiting. How many times somebody can go back on a list? I think we need some sort of management structure for that. Because honestly, like, if people don't really I fully expect that if people don't understand the issue, that they have a lot of questions, that they're going to take their own time in the background to understand. Like, there's ample opportunity to speak with staff. I get the decision-making process, like making the final pieces, but I don't we can't have the meeting consumed with, like, I only read the report while you were presenting and I don't really understand it.
Yeah.
We don't have time for that. Or the other side, badgering staff, politicking, is also not a good use of our time, I don't think, as a system. So I don't know what the number is, but
Guidelines, not rules.
well, no, I think honestly, I think we're at the point that we need rules. But being able to, being able to call the question in committee,
That's coming up.
Yeah, after 3 times. Like, you've been on the list 3 times. We're calling the question. Like, if you really didn't understand the issue, you should have approached this before tonight, kind of idea.
Okay.
So that's me. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Dawson, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and through the chair. I agree with most everything that's been said. I like the idea of setting some parameters around the speaking time of CACs, or some guidelines and best practices. I actually was going to say the same for staff presentations, if there could be a set of guidelines maybe around that. I'm such a visual learner, and I really, really appreciate when there's some kind of a PowerPoint or presentation that highlights the key points of a report. I think that's actually also extremely important for public engagement and confidence. So that is something I would like to see as an outcome, because I'm noticing that staff kind of come, all of them, with a different approach. Some will give a meaningful presentation with a PowerPoint. Others will just come and say, here's the report before you. Do you have any questions? So it would be nice to have something around that too. Have we already talked about delegations? I apologize.
No, that's coming up later in this meeting. So
okay.
Just hold your thoughts.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you very much. Associate Director, you wanted to make a comment?
Okay, thank you very much. There are, Vitaly, Plotnikov and I were just having a discussion earlier about guidelines and what they are and how enforceable they are. So guidelines are not enforceable. So I just want to make sure that people are aware. So if worst case scenario, you do have a presentation by a CAC member, let's say, that is not controlled. It is ongoing. Again, worst case scenario, it normally doesn't happen. A guideline cannot be enforced by the chair. So that's one thing to think about. The other corollary, because we do understand where you're coming from in terms of maybe not limiting 5 minutes is would have to be a very succinct presentation, is to find some other way in the bylaws that allows the chair to be able to manage it when it gets way too extended or too long. Obviously, gentle reminders along the way, but at some point, the chair of the meeting needs to have a mechanism to be able to close that particular speaker.
No filibustering.
We've seen one worst case scenario, unfortunately, in real life, and sometimes you do have to prepare for the worst case scenario. So I would strongly recommend that, and I highly recommend we will prepare some guidelines and best practices for staff and others who are presenting, but the chair of the meeting needs something to be able to rely upon. And when there's more discretion that the chair has, the higher the risk of inconsistent decision-making amongst the different chairs in different meetings. And again, there may be criticism of the chair for their decision. So if there is some sort of clear expectation or a rule in the bylaw that allows a little more flexibility if need be, or something else in the bylaw that gives the chair the ability to do so after a certain time period, I would highly recommend you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I pass the chair, Trustee McLean?
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. So just to build on comments that have already been said, I think it's really up to the director or the associate whose staff present to provide some sort of guideline expectation of the salient points that should be presented. I completely agree with my colleague, Trustee Dawson. I really like presentations. I really think that they are important. And I also appreciate the fact that most presentations are at committee, visual presentations are at committee, because that's where the substantive discussion has to be. But last night, for example, we didn't discuss math at committee. We moved it to board. In my mind, that should have been a visual presentation as opposed to somebody talking for 20 minutes. I think it would have been far more impactful from a public perspective. So I think maybe that's something that staff presentations, I think that's something staff should work on in terms of what the guidelines should be, what's important in a board meeting to show the public, because most public won't go to committee, most public will watch board, and to think about the key points on learning and well-being. We want the public to get that we're part of our multi-year strategic plan through the reports that we're sharing at board. I think that that's an important piece. So I'm not in favor of putting any caveats around speaking time for staff. I think that's a staff thing to do. In terms of CACs, I completely agree with Associate Director. I don't think we should have any, I appreciate guidelines, but I also think there should be, if the speaking time exceeds 15 minutes, the chair has the ability to stop, and follow-up can happen through written blah, blah. Because I have noticed we have things like delegations have discretion, and I get upset at chairs that allow for 30 or 35 or whatever delegations, because it doesn't facilitate the work of the board at the meeting. So I love guidelines, but I do think I agree with you, Associate Director. There should be some sort of hard stop. I threw out 15 minutes. Obviously, if there's 3 CACs presenting, I don't necessarily mean all 3 have to be within 15 minutes. I think it will depend on the content of their recommendations. And again, that's something for me that should be discussed in agenda clearing and get a scope or a sense of. And I think it's fair to say this is a really full agenda. So we're only going to really allow this much. So I think it should say up to a certain time for the chair's discretion, because it would depend on the agenda. Like I looked at GPC for this Wednesday and I'm thinking, you know, there's really only one policy approval, 2 reports of this is the, you know, like, so it really would depend on the content of an agenda. So those are my comments on this topic. And I'll take back the chair and just Trustee McLean, please go ahead.
Yeah, just something, but as I was hearing from colleagues, like when staff presents at committee, I think it's great, you know, we're there and we want those presentations. We want fulsome, you know, complete engaging conversations back and forth. Staff is trying to share information. I think that's great. But then when they go to board and we pull them, I'm not sure we're looking for the same presentation kind of thing. I think at board, we're generally trying to get a whole lot more done. So if we do pull it, then I think a condensed version of that becomes more beneficial. And so that, because most of the time when we're doing it, we're not trying to get into the meat and potatoes of it because we did that 3 nights ago or the week prior. We're really doing it to show off. We're really saying cool things are happening in our board. We'd like the public to see it, right? And that's for the majority of the reason, I think, why we pull things. So I think it would be, and I'm not sure that's, but I think a message to staff around that, you know, that's kind of like would be helpful, I think, because with like the math one we got last night kind of went on like a little longer. I think it was virtually the same one we got.
We never got one at
Oh,
committee.
okay.
Remember, we
But
moved it.
we get a fair amount of math then.
Right.
And it wasn't bad. It was interesting, but we also got to the end of the agenda with running out of time, like we ran out of time. So
No, appreciate that. Anyone else have any further comments on this particular item? Trustee King?
I think just echoing a little bit more agreement. The points that Trustee Arts made, I think are valid, but I don't think they're specific to CACs. I think that is more about meeting management across committees in general. So I think we can kind of take those and apply them everywhere. I'm liking the idea of a max time for CAC presentation with the continuation of the questions, the discussion, and that just being managed by the chair without specific parameters. And I like the 15 minutes feels like a good amount of time if there are, you know, more than one recommendation being made.
Thank you. Anyone else online? Not Trustee Williams, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you to you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the, you know, we've already had a bit of discussion about the importance or the value of that visual presentation that can be done by staff with the slides, with the PowerPoint presentations. And I think that they'd be like really valuable when items are also pulled at board. You know, it really gives the public an opportunity to see like an overview and pinpointing some of the key points that we want to, you know, share and emphasize with the public. So those were just a couple of my points. I think it would really add a bit of value in the communication sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think we'll move on to the next topic, please, which is the requirement to end debate, which would be directly tied to our previous conversation about the number of times to speak at committee. I'll shift it around online. Trustee Williams, would you like to start this one? If you have no comments, don't worry. I don't want to put people on the spot.
I'll start briefly to you, Madam Chair. You know, I I understand and I appreciate the purpose of having it unlimited now is to encourage and have that opportunity, like for full engagement, full discussion. However, unlimited, for reasons some of my colleagues have mentioned, you know, extending the debate in a way that's not totally productive. I think there needs to be some kind of um, framework, some limitations. Um, Unlimited for me um, is not totally productive. There needs to be ample opportunity for discussion, but unlimited at committee, you know, there's got to be some time limit there, like back on the list 3 times. I
Okay,
think it's
a
plenty.
question of clarification, because I think this goes with the previous conversation. If there is consensus that speaking at committee 3 times, whether it be 5 minutes or 533, we didn't land on that, but speaking 3 times is a requirement to end debate necessary. I think I'd like that conversation as well as part of this. So if everybody can speak 3 times, but you know the most is 3 times, do we still want a requirement to end debate?
Maybe my gut reaction is yes.
Okay, and
It
2/3?
is on 2/3, like
Perfect.
to still have that tool in the tool belt,
Perfect.
you know,
Thank you.
so we may not use it, but it's still there.
Thank you. I just wanted to push that a little bit further. Trustee Arts or Trustee Dawson online, any comments on this?
I think I would just repeat what Trustee Williams said, and your point, Trustee Laskin, raises a question for me. If somebody moved to suspend the bylaws so you could have unlimited debate, could you then still use a call to question when you're, when it's done and it's going in circles?
Thank you. Still needed. Appreciate that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anything, Trustee Dawson, or I'll go to Trustee King? I'll go to Trustee King. Please go ahead.
Thanks, through you, Chair. I'm in support of maintaining what we have now and end debate with the 2/3 vote. And I will get to the part about number of rounds of speaking because that directly relates.
Thank you very much. Trustee McLean?
Yeah, if we went to 533, for example, then I wouldn't like to have this. I would like to let that play out. We would limit, we would encourage 3 rounds, but the end would be in sight. There would be parameters around that. If we leave it or if we went to 355, then I think the mechanism becomes valuable because then you can it starts to get away. So for me, it really does come what we decide earlier, but I like the idea that this is kind of, when people do this is kind of rude, right? Like this is awkward for it's kind of awkward. And if we created a mechanism that took it out, then and we got to roughly the same place, I think that would be beneficial. Because if you're the one that this happens to, I'm not seeing that you don't get offended. I can see how that would be problematic. So if we can put limits, put some controls in, giving an ample opportunity to be heard and understanding that you have to be concise because these are the rules. You get 3 chances these times. And at that point, then this wouldn't be, so it kind of depends on where we lie.
Thank you. Trustee Hastings, anything on this one?
I thank you. Would not like to see anything changed as far as the amount of, I'm gonna end the debate.
Okay, thank you. But were you going to go a butt? Sorry, I'm
There's
like,
a but. I would not like to see a change where we would not, or we would be curtailed in what we're trying to say. That part would not be good. And that's what I meant.
thank you very much. May I pass the chair? Thank you. I too would like to keep this in. I understand your point, Trustee McLean, but there's been too many circumstances from my experience where the grandstanding becomes problematic to the business of the board. The other thing I think with this one and with all of them, frankly, is the professional learning for chairs from meeting management. Because if somebody's now speaking for the third time, raising the same issues they raised in the first time or the same questions they raised in the first time, it's the way to move the meeting along. It's a bit of an art, not a science. Without offending, you're right, Trustee McLean, you can feel very offended. I mean, it's happened to me. I know how I feel. But on the other hand, with 22 of us and the important business that has to be done at meetings and the more time pressure that's going to come up because of the in-person for some of this board work, I would like to leave it in, and I'm happy with the 2/3 as well. Okay, next piece. So this is about receiving reports. I'm not going to go around the table on this one. Who would like to start? Trustee McLean.
Yeah, through you, Chair. When we had the governance professional learning out, we talked about this a little bit, and this is not, in her professional opinion, this was not good practice. And I think we get in trouble with this a little bit because I think when we get no votes about the motion to receive, it's largely about they disagree with the content necessarily, or they object to a portion of the content. And that's not really what, like, it's not for approval. It's just to acknowledge that it was. So the vote to receive, I don't think has a value. It's my understanding it's not good governance. And for me, I would prefer not to do it.
Thank you very much. Trustee King?
Thanks to the chair. I just wanted to understand from staff's perspective if there is something different that they are expecting when something is presented for information versus when it's presented for receipt.
Great question. Because the way information is handled now, it's omnibus, but you can ask questions on it. We don't vote.
Through the chair, and perhaps Vitaly will have much better answer than I. I don't understand the need to receive a report, and that's why your question's stumping me. Because in my view, once we hit it on the agenda and we start addressing it, it's deemed received. And I should say, staff who have poured hundreds of hours into reports only to not have it be received, I know, not directed at staff, it is demoralizing, I have to say. So if we already have the item that we're already talking about on the agenda, it is in effect received, in my view. So we can get away from the distinction between for information, for receipt by just removing the receipt requirement.
May I just ask for clarification? I think what Trustee King was asking is, what is the difference between receiving something, just receipt, and receiving it for information? Because right now there's on agendas it says for information, and things like procedures are there. Isn't it the same thing? If you're receiving something for information, you're receiving something.
Mhm.
So I think, forgive me, Trustee King, but I think you were trying to get across the idea of the difference between information and receipt, or did I misunderstand?
You've understood it correctly. So
Mhm.
I think what I'm asking is the follow-up piece. Is there something different
Mhm.
that you expect to happen? So,
If the answer is no,
right.
right.
And through the chair, perhaps Denise Joseph Dowers, just with her experience, might be able to provide some wisdom as well.
Hi Denise, welcome.
Hi. Yes. The difference, I think, is with what we have right now for information only is basically procedures, which is the purview of staff, right? So it's just information. If you have a question about it, you ask, right? Matters that go to the board for receipt is information the director wants to share, and staff may decide and trustees may decide to ask for by way of motion for something different. It is not only for receipt, but other action could take place. Like for instance, with governance now with the procedures. It's only information. If you have a question about it, you could ask a question, but there's no vote on it because this is not the business of trustees per se. The director is just sharing information with you. I don't know if that helps a bit. It's more and matters going to the board for receipt is more than information. You have the opportunity to make changes. Does that help?
It does, and I have a follow-up question then. So the for information piece, thank you, that's very clear. That's not the business of the board, so I can set that one aside. What are the other actions that could result from a report for receipt? You mentioned that there are other actions that could come out of that. So what are they?
If you would like the director to move in a different direction, you move a motion based on the topic, you move a different recommendation.
But sorry to push back, but what's a different recommendation than receipt? To approve or to refer
No,
back?
to do something different based on what is in whatever the report is about, right? And if trustees would like the director to do something different, go in a different direction, add something additional. I'm trying to think of an example of where you've just more than received the report or in the past you made a different decision than vote to receive.
Trustee McLean?
Well, yeah, well, through you, like referral, like they bring it for information and there's something we find confusing. So we'll send it back, we'll refer it back with an understanding that we'd like the director and in 60 days, 30 days, whatever, to bring it back to probably the same committee or the same board with additional information but that's something that would happen. And
On a receipt?
if they bring
Sorry, I'm
us,
trying to think of an example. I don't remember an example. I just remember for receipt, receiving or not receiving. I don't remember changes, but
we've never,
Yeah.
okay, well then I'm not, like
Yeah,
I can.
I'll have to search for one.
yeah, it's not common practice because it's just for receipt. It doesn't mean they're finished with their work.
Okay, I would have thought that we had done this. I would have said lots of times. So I guess maybe I'm not.
So may I, anyone on the list? Trustee Arts and then Trustee Williams, and then I'd like to pass the chair. Trustee Arts?
Yeah, so this is for receipt stuff, and then some of the because politicking on things that, especially when they're what we heard, where there is like, so okay, I'm gonna restart. My perspective is that we are legislated to do the business of the board in public, and the business of the board is where we make decisions, and we get a significant amount of our reports for receipt where we're not actually doing any actual business. We're not making decisions necessarily. There are times where staff bring an update and they're asking for feedback, and that's a different model than things that come for information or are simply updates. I really like where we've gone with the governance with GPC and putting procedures in a for information format. I don't exactly know how to do this, but I would really like to see a, I don't want to call it a compliance system, but I would like to see a like, you know, I don't know if Eastscribe can do this, a checkbox. Yes, I read the report. And I think other boards do that in the fact that once you approve the agenda, you have received the reports. So that's one mechanism. But I think this is causing us too many problems. And a bulk of like, and I think as a board where our time is supposed to be, like public time is supposed to be around, you know, the things that we can actually decide as trustees, as board members. I think big percentage of our time is spent not doing that. So that's my input.
Thank you very much, Trustee Williams.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate this part of the discussion in particular, and would really like some clarity. Similar to what I've heard about the receive for information, let's say. I'm putting that aside because that sounds, based on what governance has said, it's for information. We're not doing anything with it. The things that come to us for receipt, I just want a little bit more clarification on what happens if you receive and what happens if you don't receive. I've heard in the discussion so far that for receipt gives trustees an opportunity to you know, make recommendations, motions that come out of whatever we're receiving. But just the clarity, it's usually like information, work that staff has done, whether it's received or not received, the work's been done. But we have an opportunity to maybe, as the board, advise the director on some additional steps or additional other things that can happen. So through you, Madam Chair, can I get that more information, more clarity? What happens if trustees receive, approve receipt, or not approve receipt? For example, referring it back to staff.
Ms. Joseph Dowers, did you want to comment?
I just want to add that it is more or less a sign of acknowledgement of the work that staff has done, more
Right.
so to get it into the
Substance of the
records. Yeah, it's acknowledging the work.
Associate Director Pond?
Through the chair, the for information, just going back to the original question about for information, typically at GPC when it's for information, there is no presentation of the item at all. I know the last meeting didn't go that way, but in any event, there should be no presentation of it. We've invited questions, although that is a practice I think we probably should reconsider. For receipt, there is information that's presented. So it's not just a question piece. So to me, that's been, I think, a difference between just for information and for receipt. My understanding is there have been a couple of cases where a report was voted to not have been received, but staff will continue to do the work anyways. That's reported in the report. So to us, not receiving a report does not prevent us from continuing to do the work that we need to do. However, it is symbolic for some, and in my view, not good governance if it's used as a protest to something.
Thank you very much. I'll continue on the list. I have Trustee Dawson, then I'll come back to you, Trustee King, and then I'll pass the chair. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. I really appreciate this discussion. I too have been very confused about receipt versus information versus approval. And I think we really need to very clearly communicate to the public the differences between those things. You know, we had a motion or a report to receive in the past that the public believed was for approval. And so, you know, I that is my only caution in even having anything to be received. But in hearing this conversation, I do see the value of continuing to have these things for receipt, but it's more the branding of them. And I know that's not necessarily for a bylaws review, but as we go through this, in the back of my mind, I am considering that in everything, that all of the decisions that we're making around this is how will this be branded clearly to the public? And that's all I really have to say.
Thank you very much, Trustee King.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm hearing that the defining factor here is that there's no decision to be made when it's for receipt. That's the distinction, I think, with the approval. I'm going to come at this a different way. So I think three things can happen when the director wants to share information with us. We acknowledge it, we like it, and we have no real actions or concerns. Scenario one. Scenario two, we acknowledge it, we like it, maybe we have some feedback, a little bit of instruction, nothing too substantive, right? And then you have scenario three, where we have major concerns about what is being shared, and we want to see something different. We want to see a different direction. And I think what I'm trying to get at is, can we get some clear definition for how we handle those three different scenarios?
If I can pass the chair. Thank you very much. For me, in my experience, receiving reports are mostly updates or progress reports. They're not finished because they're not here for approval. They are like the math update, the update on combating hate. The update reports were received. We have a practice here when there's an oral report and there's no paper in front of us, there is no vote. It's just an oral report. So I'm wondering if it, and I don't remember what was in the Howell presentation on good governance in terms of what an agenda would look like with those reports in it. So I'm wondering if there was a category similar to what we do with the procedures, which is they're listed and the reports are there. And when we get to that item, it's just a general, are there any questions or comments on these items? So there's no motions out of it, but it allows for discussion because it's not for decision making. I mean, we have been part, I mean, I've certainly voted not to receive an Integrity Commissioner's report in the past. That didn't stop the work. The Integrity Commissioner still did the work. I didn't receive it. The board took no action on that particular item because if you didn't receive the report, you didn't receive the recommendations. So it was over. So I think that's a different, that will never happen again because of the change in the legislation. Other reports for receipt are like the one that Trustee Dawson is referring to. People thought by receiving the consultation with the Jewish community, the board was approving the recommendations. Even though it was clear in the report, this was the voice of the community, people were insulted because it wasn't received, because it was the voice of the community, but that was a bit of a protest vote. So that was that conversation about not receiving something from a protest perspective. And I was part of that early on when staff added in anti-Palestinian racism. I voted not to receive that report. That was my protest vote. So I think and it wasn't because I didn't appreciate that it exists. For me, it was those strategies, which is moot now because we're overarching it, were from data from the portal, and staff just adding that in without presenting us any data of why they were doing it, for me was not following the board motion. So that was my point there. But I think what I'm hearing, my preference would be there would have to be something that allowed conversation if one didn't like the direction it was going in, or somebody to comment, well, but our motion didn't say that, or something like that, for staff to hear, that has no decision-making in it. So there's no need to move a motion. There's no need to move receipt. It's just for a conversation. And I think that's one way of doing it. But again, I'm hopeful that staff, through you, Mr. Chair, might go back to that report that was presented to us from, or look at how the agendas are set up for some of the boards that don't have this in their bylaws, but trustees still receive reports, how those reports are provided, not use the word received, are provided to trustees, so there are up, so, that like I'm thinking of on policy development, if it's at Schedule 3 of Schedule 5, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, do we receive that or do we approve that? We receive that because it's an update, correct?
Phase 3?
Yeah, like policy development has 5 stages in it. There's 1, number 2, number 3. There's one on the next governance committee meeting. Are we receiving that or are we approving that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the work plan, it's phase 1, goes
Right.
for approval.
It's for approval. Okay.
And then final for approval. But in the middle, sometimes we bring to you draft policy for receipt before we initiate consultation. So that's the time when we essentially ask for your feedback, comments, but it's not for approval. It's for discussion, as you mentioned earlier.
So maybe that's something to consider, through you, Mr. Chair. Oh, okay. I'll just finish my thought and then I'll go to Ms. Joseph Dowers. Maybe there's different categories for discussion, for feedback, for input, as opposed to something that you could say, no, I don't want to receive it, or no. Like if you don't have any input, you just don't speak. Or if you have different input, you speak, but there's no action in a motion. That's what I would be looking for. And I'll take the chair back, Mr. Chair, and go to Ms. Joseph Dowers and then come to you.
I just wanted to comment, if you mentioned something about following the part that we do now with information items, where they're just listed and there's no discussion. But most of the reports that go to board committee are for receipt. So if there is no discussion, half of your work would be done there.
I'm not saying so. Associate Director.
Through the chair, I'm thinking we want the desire to not cause confusion to members of the public. So we don't want to confuse members of the public. We also don't want to waste time whether to receive or not. I am wondering if we get to a point where approval, yes or no, and that requires a board vote. The other one is, and however we label it, probably something different than for information, because again, information, there's no presentation. If it's for receipt, it does not have to be voted on. it's received once you hit that agenda item, or as Trustee Arts mentioned earlier, once you approve the agenda, it's deemed received. So I think to me, it's solved by not having a vote at all. And we can try to maintain or rename some of the categories. I think the issue is when you have a vote on receipt, there should be no vote on a receipt. It's been received once we start talking about it.
Thank you, Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair. I think it would be interesting if our governance professional development was taped, I think it'd be worth exploring, because I can't testify in a court of law, but my personal recollection when we had this conversation was that to vote to receive was inappropriate, not good governance. But she made room for the fact that you might refer it back with different direction, right? And that, I think, is what Trustee King had shared. If you're not happy with what you receive because there's something in it and you want to, like, in theory, all the reports are from the director and he's our one employee, right? So if you're headed somewhere, or you think you missed the point of the request, or because it's a report based on something we asked earlier or something, I think it's important to have the ability to refer it back in rare instances where we think, it's not clear enough. It missed. We asked for certain work and we didn't, people misunderstood the request because, or something like that. But having the mechanism to share with the director that, not having any view to redirect, I think is problematic. I think that it's important that the board, in a unique situation where you got something that wasn't what, that you'd have a mechanism to be able to say, we can't just put this in the win column and move on simply because it was on the agenda and we're done. We need a mechanism to play a role, I guess, in either extending this conversation or this work. And it may not, so I just think that would be important. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Trustee King.
I like where Trustee McLean is going with this. So I was thinking, in my mind, the three categories are some things for review. You can have questions about it, but it's really just for review. Or it's for direction and feedback. And I think having the ability to refer when there are major concerns and substantive changes being asked for, I think that helps the distinction between just providing some helpful feedback and change of direction. And then for approval would be completely distinct and understood. So review, direction, approval.
Thank you very much. Trustee Williams online.
Thank you. And to you, Madam Chair. Back to a point that was made earlier about, the value of some visual representation of some of these things. For our policy process, we have that mapping of, what happens when. Maybe something like that would be helpful here for trustees and for the public as well. Just like some kind of decision mapping diagram to show what happens when, and like a little bit of a description of like what these pathways look like or where they could go. Just very simple and straightforward. I don't know if that would be helpful for me. I think it could be.
Thank you. I think it could be helpful for all of us. So any further comments on this before we move on? Thank you, Trustee Hastings.
I'm listening to the debate going around the table and through the ether, and it does make sense. But if you receive something, it is thrown on the table. This is for receipt. It's not for doing anything else other than, yes, we'll take it, we'll look at it, we'll come back to you later about it. That's all it's there for. It's not there to say, oh, I don't like what it says, so I'm not going to receive it. It was received.
Thank you. Okay, extending meeting time, next section. Who wants to talk about hard stop at 10? Any recommendations? Trustee Hastings?
Again, hard stop depends on what it is that you're into. Is it really important? Is it very important? Or can we do it later? A soft stop says we're done.
Okay, Trustee King, then Trustee McLean.
I would support a soft stop at 10 with motions to extend. I think if we do the work on the delegations end and we do the work on meeting management, then I think we can get to a place and we can start to set the conditions and the expectations and the practice that we're building the kind of agendas that are manageable in that time.
Can I just push and ask a soft stop at 10? Do you have a hard stop?
Oh, I don't know that I do. Like, I kind of want to say hard stop at 11, but I know the nature of sometimes how things go, and sometimes it's worse to let something carry over if you
Okay.
can just do it in 10 minutes. So I'm iffy there.
Thank you. Trustee McLean?
Thank you, and through the chair. And this is what's the downside of when you offer me a survey, because I tried to reinvent the wheel when you gave me the survey. I want to start at 6 o'clock. Like, I want to do all kinds of things. Like, I want to start our board meetings at 6 instead of 7. And I want to make to get away from the private session being this committee, this regular business, that all this attendance, that they move around, and so that they wouldn't fall into that category anymore. And that would allow us to start at 6. And I think we could do that, and we can set a target, the soft stop at 10. I don't care where, because I've been here 6+ years and I've never once got to wherever the soft stop was, wherever you put it, and not had the will of the board to extend. We weren't happy about doing it, but sometimes you need to do things that day. And like last night, we looked at 2 of those. Those don't need to be done. We need, we do them later. But the other was somewhat timely, so nobody was excited. We'd been here long enough. We were all happy to go home, but so there was the one item that we kind of needed to get to. So setting a soft stop at 10, because that's a good goal and that's great. But the hard stop, I've got the hard stop scares me. I think that could get in the way. I think that could be a problem. So I wouldn't be excited about that.
If I can pass the chair. So you haven't been here for meetings that went till 2 and 3 in the morning. And that was the whole reason why there was a hard stop put in. Because meetings used to go regularly till 2 and 3 in the morning. And that made it very difficult for staff, and it made it very difficult for trustees who work. So that was why over the years, the bylaws were amended with a hard stop, because it just wasn't good governance decisions weren't being made in your 8th hour of a meeting or your 9th hour of a meeting. So I support soft stop at 10, hard stop still at midnight. Because I think that there's a point at which it's bad governance to keep on and on and on. I also support starting earlier, not having private session before as a normal process. I think 4:30 is difficult for some people to come who work. I think 6 o'clock is fair. I think dinner could be available from 5 or 5:30, because I really like the idea at board meetings we're together again. We should be together. So I kind of like the idea that something's before, simply because then that forces people to come. So when you break for dinner, you are all together. So I'd like to kind of leave some of that in staff's capable hands, to think about what makes sense for them too. Because remember, when we're meeting, it's at the end of their business day already. So to try to facilitate that, to be able to start earlier makes sense to me. I also like, Trustee McLean, your idea that there doesn't have to be a set time for private. You know, whether you have to have another meeting or private's tacked on to something else. And if private is known as a committee of the whole, it can stay virtual as well. The thing about private virtual though, is if there's documentation, you really have to be here in person. So I don't even mind starting at 6, breaking at 8, if there's any private items, and coming back at 9 or whatever we need to do. But anyway, I think there are some ways we could facilitate board meetings at least. But soft stop at 10 for sure, not at 11. 11's too late. But I would continue to support a hard stop, because in my experience, one needs that to protect the work of the board.
Through the chair, just could you clarify through the chair, could you clarify the hard stop time?
I said hard stop at midnight.
Okay. Thank you.
I think they're for 11:59.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I'll return the chair to you.
Thank you very much. Trustee McLean, Trustee Williams, and then Trustee Arts.
I'm done.
Oh, thank you. Trustee Williams.
Okay, thank you through you, Madam Chair. I also like the idea of like starting a little bit earlier, like starting at 6 with the soft stop at 10, I think is very reasonable. With the soft stop at 10 and the hard stop at 11:59, for the reasons that have already been mentioned. You know, people have been at it for hours, having discussions for hours, looking at documents for hours. There has to be a reasonable hard stop. After a certain period of time, like fatigue starts to set in. I like the idea of maybe having the dinner break at the beginning, like sometime between like 5 and 6 when we start. So folks come from work, staff have, finished some of their work during the day in the building, and just have a meal together, have time to gather together for a meal, and then start the meeting at 6. So those were my comments about the soft and the hard stop.
Thank you very much. Trustee Arts. Trustee Arts? She's not there? Okay, Trustee McLean, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, and through the chair. And I'm just kind of throwing this out there, but is it possible to, if we have a soft stop at 10, that we put in the provision that we can extend, but only for those things that are of a timely nature. Like we can't, if there's no reason why the next item on the agenda has to be dealt with at this meeting, then we shouldn't extend. Like if we're going to say we have a soft stop at 10 and we start adjusting the agenda to deal with that which is timely and redirecting that which is not, so that.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Associate Director?
Through the chair, just again, a clarification with Trustee McLean's suggestion, would there still be a hard stop at any time?
11.
Yeah, I mean, the 11:59 works. I mean.
Okay.
Right, like that, we did it, it's only happened once in my time here that we went beyond, and then we just voted to,
Move all the other items.
or no, at that time, we voted to operate outside the bylaws or suspend the bylaws because we'd spent 45 minutes and we needed 5 more. And, we didn't want to have to reconvene the next day to do this. So that's what we did. And it happened so infrequently that we could still do that. So setting the hard stop at 11:59 is a great expectation for everybody to have.
Thank you very much. Trustee King.
I just wanted to confirm the title says board and committee meetings. We're talking about both? Yes, okay. I think I've been responding with board meetings in mind.
Well, committees start at 4:30.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, since we're here, I'm going to open up this can of worms and see if there's been any history or discussion on that start time and if it fits or if folks might want to reconsider. I'm thinking about that same opportunity to have dinner before, maybe from 5 to 6 and then get into it.
We can
I'm
leave
just
that in
putting it out
staff.
there.
We can leave that in staff's hands to think about. How's that? Or would you like to?
If trustees feel they want to add, maybe it's not an issue.
I'll throw the chair. I'll throw my comments into this one. Trustee McLean. Yeah, I thought more as we had this last conversation, I was talking about board. In terms of committee starting at 4:30, I actually do like the idea instead of stopping at 6:37 to have a bite to eat, to call it at 4:30 and begin the agenda at 5:30. Like I like the idea of meeting ahead of time. It allows for that more relationship building, and it's awfully awkward to be starving and not appropriate to. So, I mean, for me, if we go to like 10 delegations, that could start at 4:30. Then the dinner break is between delegations and the agenda or something like that. Or, it depends. I think it depends on how we want to do delegations. The dance between not too early so people have a chance to come if they want to come in person, not too late, like what's the sweet spot? I don't know. But anyway, I think it's worth thinking about it all as a package.
And before I give the chair back, I'll just share that for those of you who actually eat, it would be beneficial to eat warm food as opposed to the cold food after it's been sitting there for 3 hours before we break, right? Like this.
Can we add food on the agenda? I have some comments about that, but anyway, Associate Director.
Through the chair, we can certainly take a look at this and provide some potential options. I do have a comment from Denise Joseph Dowers about when committee agendas will be completed by for committee meetings, if these changes are done. So the concern was meeting all the timelines.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
Perhaps if Denise Joseph Dowers would like to share her concern. Or not. I don't know if Denise, yeah.
Well, you will talk as staff
Sure.
about what, like if you need a
Sorry,
Oh.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can. Thank you.
No, I was just saying, if you start the committee meeting already, we start at 4:30 and sometimes the meeting would run until 11. So if you start later, would we be able to get through the entire agenda?
And that's a good point. So a lot depends on the work of the board, the number of meetings, what's on each agenda, all of those variables. And, maybe there's a catch-up day in our schedules in advance that we can cancel if we don't need it.
Or maybe it would work for the 3 statutory committees, but it wouldn't work as well for P&P because
Right.
P&P, like that always, has a tendency to run long. But maybe for GPC, PSS and FBAC, maybe that little opportunity to get together, that could work. Where at PNP, it probably wouldn't.
Perfect. Trustee Arts? Did you want
Sorry,
to?
I got cut off from the meeting and I don't know where I got cut off. When I
No problem. We're just talking about hard stops, soft stops.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I got cut off for my whole speech. I was just talking to the grocery store then. So yes, soft stop. I like 10 o'clock. Yes, hard stop. I would prefer 11, but I get it's probably 12 would be more favorable for people. What I was saying was that, and I don't know how to do this in our board, but in other on other boards I've been on or am on, we actually set time limits on agenda items. So we say this agenda item, and I think this applies to delegations as well, as opposed to maybe a number of delegations. So aim for, like, we can accommodate up to so much time in our agenda for this item. And like, and it's work with the chair, with staff. How much time do you need to present? What kind of, how much are we expecting for discussion? Like, what kind of feedback do we want? And then it is tabled accordingly. And I know we sort of do that in terms of planning for a committee meeting, but we don't do that in terms of how we manage our time within the meeting. And I think it is best practice for us as trustees, all trustees, not just the chair and staff in a committee meeting, to be managing our time, to say, we've got a full agenda. We have this many items. We've set aside this much time per item, and we're going to stick to it. So I don't know how to do that for our board, honestly, but I would love to see that discussion of how we might do that, if we could. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just looking at the clock. I'm hard stop at 5. So we'll just carry on as much as we can get through. The next one is notice of motion. And I have some comments on this one, so I'm going to go first. May I throw you the chair? Thank you. For me, it's not just notice of motion, it's motion in general. And I know in our bylaws, we talk about motions, the format, whatever. I think we have to have some clearer rules around motions. I think they should have a template. I think they all must go through governance services before they are either moved as notices or motions themselves. So I would like to back up this conversation about motions in general, because, and I think there should be, I also think that there shouldn't be the expectation that if it's, trustees have every right to move whatever motions they wish. I get that 100%. But if it's not on a topic, if it's on a topic that's not part of the priority work of the board that's already in play, I don't think there should be an expectation that it comes immediately to the next meeting to be dealt with. I think that that has to be a conversation in agenda clearing or whoever's going to make those conversations, because there is work of the board that is the expectation of trustees that it comes back, whether it's through those annual reports or whatever. So I am 100% in favor that trustees can move whatever business they wish. I think it needs to be on a template. I think it needs to go through board services. I think board services should reserve the right to ensure that it follows current procedures, protocols, bylaws, et cetera, and it's in keeping with rules that how we govern ourselves. And then it's moved as notice. If it is significantly, so some move it as a placeholder and then come back to the next meeting with a replacement motion. if it's substantially different and the subjective definition of substantially different can be where it's the intent is the same, but the words have changed, no issue. But if it's asking for something substantially different than it asked for before, and I'm just talking about recommendations, I don't care about whereases because we really deal with recommendations. So I think then it needs to come again as a notice. So I feel pretty strongly about this because I think through the years, and I'm talking about years, we've really, we've not kept within our bylaws of expectation about what motions are. And I think we need to get back there as a governance body. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair. And who would like to go next? Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair. I've noticed that this configuration of board is dramatically different. It has taken a different philosophy towards motions than my first. Notice of motion was something we did regularly. And now, why take a week to do something I can do in 3 minutes? And business arising is the order of the day. And that's how we do business now. And I don't know that that's I'm not sure that that's a bad thing, given I was one who, we brought one last night. Like, so I'm guilty of this too. But it gets away from the whole, all your colleagues see it in advance, the public sees it in advance, the public can align against it if it's so inclined that it doesn't get to do when we do business arising. And I don't know if has to be part of this or belongs as part of this discussion or not, but I think there's been a big move to get away from the notice and get away from the benefits of what this, when it was originally created, was designed to do, is to give everyone information, the public included, because it was in all our agenda packages. They look, they see it, it's there. Okay, now I want to delegate. If you wouldn't have been happy with the letter that my motion suggests, there was no, there was no opportunity to come and say that that was a bad idea. There was no place to. So I do think that this has gotten trickier, and I think we really have to decide how we want to do business. And is one better than the other, or do we need to move away from one, or have we evolved in a positive way? Like, I'm not sure we haven't evolved in a positive way, but a downside to it is that there's less there's less presentation of, transparency, I guess is the appropriate word, because when you do the business arising, and quite often people who are doing business arising don't often share it, like don't always share it, or don't feel compelled to share it. Some do because they're trying to build support for it. Others, they want to roll the dice and they want to see if they can, carry the 10-minute. If I can, come up with 5 minutes of brilliant oratory, I'll carry the day and go with that. So it's just an interesting change in how we seem to have been going about doing business. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. Anyone online? Trustee Arts, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Trustee McLean. I think that, to me, notice of motion is both to give trustees, time to ask questions, investigate, consider the motion carefully before it actually hits the floor, and not do things on the floor or make suggestions. I would say, other than a few letters at budget time, that there always seems to be a sense of emergency in like lately in moving motions, and there really isn't. Taking the time to do them properly, taking the time to consult with colleagues is a good thing, and for the most part there's time to do that in any cycle. I don't know if one of the ways we encourage that using that full kind of time is by saying, you know, like, just because the item being presented by staff is going tonight doesn't mean the ship has sailed and you can't move any more motions around it. Like, so I don't know. I think we need to do things better that way. And then my biggest issue is that because we're supposed to be doing all of our business in public, these last minute massive changes to a motion, or, you know, they're not giving notice, doesn't actually give the public any notice that there's a decision coming. So their chance to give feedback or, you know, talk to their, you know, to reach the board is then taken away. So I think it's not good practice in terms of what our expectations of the board are.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Trustee Williams?
Hi there, and through you, Madam Chair. I also would very much appreciate and think it's a better governance model to have those notice of motions coming in a reasonable time. You know, it gives the transparency that's needed for the public to have confidence in our system and in the education system. That giving of the notice of motion for the reasons that have already been mentioned also gives the opportunity to thoroughly consider what's coming before us as a board. The opportunity to delegate, I think, is also enhanced with that, you know, notice of what's coming, that transparency. The only pieces that I think, you know, that may come up, the advocacy pieces, you know, depending on the shifting landscape, you know, what's happening with announcements from the ministry or, you know, other levels of government might require, you know, some business arising for advocacy. And I think that part is fine. So those are my comments. You know, I really think it's like a better practice to have ample time with notices of motion, so that, you know, in particular, the public has that transparency, and the transparency leading to that fuller confidence in our system.
Thank you very much. Trustee King?
Thank you, through your chair. Echoing what we've heard, I think, you know, the advice and the support from governance, I think, is something that we'd really benefit from some increase. I think having those conversations when a notice is submitted, not just around editing and format, but understanding things like when a certain report that's related might be coming. To your point, being able to identify the urgency. Is this something that might go, you know, 2 meetings forward versus the next? Looking for alignment with our strategic directions. Staff do that with their reports. They let us know how this aligns. I think the motions coming forward, we should be able to identify how this aligns with our priorities as well. The only other thing that I wondered, just to your point around the business arising versus notice, and it's just a point really. I'm just wondering, maybe we're at a place as a board where staff have more plans in place, combating hate, literacy, math, and I'm wondering if we maybe have fewer notices of motion because there are many buckets of work already underway, and maybe as trustees, we tend to be responding more to the work that's being presented with the business arising. Just an observation. It's neither here nor there, but I think that's why that might be happening to some degree.
Thank you very much. Trustee Arts and Trustee Williams, please go ahead. Trustee Arts.
Yeah, so we have emergency motions, and in the last term, we used that mechanism. We rarely ever saw business arising. We used emergency motions. I really never see anybody using emergency motions. So I don't know if it's maybe a business arising requires a 2/3, like it becomes part of an emergency motion, or it's an extension of emergency motion, or, you know, it requires 2/3 of the board to say, yes, this is an emergency and we'll do this now. Kind of like a suspending the bylaws. The other one is, I don't know how to build this into bylaws, but I would say most people are good about consulting on their motions before they come to the board. But we either need more training for chairs on ruling or a mechanism for chairs to rule a motion out of order if it doesn't comply with our policies. Because that has also happened, and these ones get, they get picked apart on the floor. There's back and forth. Like, we have to shoot them down in the meeting because they're out of order, and it just contributes to, I don't think it looks good. It contributes to lack of confidence in our ability to do this work. If I'm as chair saying you can't have clause 3 because it's, it actually in convention or in contravention of our existing policies. That doesn't need to happen if somebody just checks. I don't know how we encourage a mechanism to, and maybe it's through a template. Maybe it's your motions have to go through a template. And one of the templates is, what policies might pertain to this? Does it align with those policies is a question on that template. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So like a template and a checklist. Trustee Williams, please go ahead.
Thank you. My hand was up previously. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Other comments on motions in general? I think we've kicked this one. Now, I know the next few are about delegations. We could maybe start this conversation. I'm not sure we'll end it. So who would like to kick us off with delegations? Trustee McLean.
I'll just share initially that something that the Catholic Board does that I think is interesting. They make you provide your delegation in writing in advance to the chair, and you don't get to deviate from it. You have to give it. And part of what that guarantees is that we don't get into the debate of like the delegates getting into the debate that happened at that PNP meeting, or wherever the marathon one we had, and they were just chirping at each other through the it went on forever. They had to listen to them, and then they were pivoting and they were virtually debating. And what the Catholic Board does alleviates that, because if you have something to share with us, then come prepared and give us the message you came to prepare. And I don't think it's about sitting and deciding that they used a different adjective to describe good or bad but you don't get to pivot. You don't get to react to the person who spoke before you, or the fact that you know who's going to speak after you and try to preempt. And you have a plan, you have a message, and then you come and you deliver the message that you came to give. And part of what happened that night, this would protect us a little bit against part of what went on that evening.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. Trustee Williams, and then I'll put myself on the list.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So with delegations, I agree that I believe that we should still have in-person, virtual, and in writing. The in writing delegations, I don't believe there should be a limitation on that. Whoever wants to submit a written delegation for an agenda item can do that. With regard to virtual and in person, I honestly believe that the delegates need to be relevant or connected to the agenda item for that meeting. And there needs to be some kind of cap. I think 25 delegates in a meeting is reasonable as a cap. So those were some of my initial thoughts. I don't know about having written delegations in conjunction with a verbal delegation. In a way, that's like vetting for me. That feels like vetting a delegation and might cause some kind of administrative burden on top of the fact that you're like vetting what someone their delegation that they're coming to make. The only other thing I have to say about that is the code of conduct considerations when hearing delegations. There doesn't seem to be any mechanism for, well, there is. We let folks know about the code of conduct prior to their delegation, but just, you know, enforcing that even throughout the delegation. Like if there's a breach, if there's some egregious breach of the code of conduct, human rights considerations, that it be interrupted in the moment. I just have a sense that we need to pay attention to that a bit more. So those are my initial those were my initial comments, and just, you know, I just have the example of, I had like a number of delegations for PSSC, and I would have really appreciated at the time if there was something in the bylaws that stated the delegation needs to be with regard to an agenda item that's being discussed at the meeting. So those are my initial comments. Thank you, through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll give you the chair, Trustee McLean. So we used to have 10 as a maximum, 10 at 5 minutes. We used to have anybody could apply. You had to fill out the form. The item had to be on the agenda. And you had to, when you filled out the form to apply, you had to say whether you were going to speak in favor or against the item. So that as chair, you might have 30 in front of you, and it's on a variety of the agenda items. Sometimes if you had like a large number, you would group them into item 1. Well, we have 7 for, 6 against, item 2, 7 for, you know, whatever it would be. And then as chair, you would randomly select 1 from each side, 2 from each side. It depended how long you had in the meeting or the number of items. So I don't believe we would need to have the entire delegation written out, though I could maybe able to be convinced about that. But I think our form should identify, first of all, I completely agree. You should only be hearing delegations on an item of the agenda at those meetings. Now I'll put a caveat to that to say, what would the other mechanism be for people to delegate to the board on items of the board that isn't on the agenda? And my thought for that is a couple-fold. If trustees hold ward forums, anybody can come and speak to their trustee or get in touch with their trustee. Number 2 is, could there be quarterly meetings, or because we don't really work in quarters, maybe 3, 1 a term for just an open mic, where it wouldn't be necessarily quorum, it wouldn't be necessarily who's on the committee, it could be just come and speak, and then as trustees, we could schedule to make sure that, you know, I'll do the spring one, you know, put up my hand, I'll do the spring one, and try to get like a nucleus of 6 to 8 or whatever, so that people didn't feel they were speaking to no one. Because now at budget consultations, like people are speaking to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 trustees in a room. They're not, and anyway, so that's just some of my thoughts. I think 25 at 5 minutes means you're having 2.5 hours of your meeting on delegations. That is too many for me. 20 at 3 minutes, that's an hour. By the time you go in and out and ask your questions, that's still going to be an hour and a half minimum. So, you know, maybe the sweet spot is between 10 and 20, depending on the number of of agenda items. But, you know, especially if we're starting our like I'm trying to think logically, if we're starting our meetings at 6, we're having 2 hours, you don't get into the business of a lot of staff are sitting around. They're not necessarily needing to hear the delegations because they're not the decision makers. Like you're trying to balance the business of the board, which is why we only used to have 10. And we did have special, like budget, we would always have special days. But other than that, for regular business of the board, it wasn't meant to hear, you know, the 17 people, or back in the day, we actually had trustees who would pay for a bus and bus their delegates here so that they could make their political points and have like 30, you know, whatever lined up, but only 10 of them got to speak, but the room would be full of people egging them on, right? So I think there has to, and even now, trustees do it. You have an item on the agenda, you want to make sure trustees, so you lobby some people to come and speak. It's just what you do. I think having a more limited number and more fair representation of pro and against gives you the perspective of the conversation out there. And I agree, not limiting written is appropriate. But I do think there should be a maximum 500 words or maximum number, like again, a template for written delegations, subject, decision, comments on the decision, other thought, like help guide people so when you read it, it's actually useful as a trustee that you're actually getting commentary on what the item is for you that helps you make your decisions. But you know, if it's really going to be helpful, the delegation should almost be the day before the meeting so that you can have time to digest what they're saying. But that's not possible in our life. But anyway, so those are my comments. Has to be on the agenda, but I would really like to hold time for some sort of open mic once a term. So that people still feel they can speak to the board on an item that's not on their agenda and an item that's really important to them, but not personally. It has to be the business of the board. It can't be about their child. I don't know, I vote for 3 minutes and try to have a few more than 10. But I do not want to spend more than an hour of a board meeting on delegations. I just really don't. So those are my comments, and I'll give you the chair back, Trustee McLean, Trustee Hastings, and then Trustee King.
You can go. If you had something, go ahead.
Oh, I got some. I see eye to eye with Dee. I like her thoughts, but I'd also like to have somebody recognize we, the people, and the people are 22 of us, soon to be 23. We're elected by those people that want to come in and talk to us. And yes, I like the idea of having a quarterly open mic and open mic night, but I don't want to see our people, our constituents, which we're told we don't have, shut up. I don't want them shut up. They put us there, so they come, they want to talk, we're going to let them talk.
Thank you. They can talk through written delegations. Trustee King.
Okay. Through you, Chair, agree that delegations should be agenda related at committee. I like the idea of a time limit, so spending an hour in the meeting, and that could be 10 delegates at 5 minutes, or if there are multiple items on the agenda or something of a high interest, the chair could amend that to the 20 at 3, but either way, they still fit in the hour. Requiring the name in advance and a summary of what's being shared, I think would suffice for me. I think it's fair for folks to be able to have some flexibility to first of all, have some time between when they had to submit their delegation and then when they're actually delivering it, because there's some time span in between there. And I think it's fair to be able to pivot and respond somewhat to what you've heard. So I wouldn't want to be so restrictive that they have to follow what they've provided in writing. I like how we are doing separate meetings when there's a higher volume, so similar to what we've done for FBEC this year. Like the idea of having a couple of, ask anything open forum, maybe one in each learning center. And to your point, Trustee Laskin, I'm actually thinking now, I like the idea of having the delegations earlier with that break at lunch, because I think if we have that 1 hour time frame, like we know what it is, they've got that time. The break actually allows us that time to digest a little bit, speak as colleagues, and then get into the
Gotcha.
consideration. Yeah. So I think that was everything on that one for me.
Thank you. And I have Trustee Arts and Trustee Dawson, and then I think we might have to break this conversation. Thank you very much, Trustee Arts.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I think, yes, what I've heard, keeping it to like aiming for an hour of time limit. So, and I'm good with either 3 or 5 minutes and however many delegates kind of fit into an hour that way. Yeah, having them early in the break. I like Trustee King's suggestion of being able to actually digest. I will say in response to Trustee Williams that other boards that require people to submit their written delegation are definitely using the written delegations to vet who they allow to speak, and delegates who are going to bring a racist or bigoted commentary that does not align with the values of the board are not given an oral platform. So several boards have dealt with that. That was has been court cases as well. And the court has ruled that boards are allowed to control that narrative. And I think like for us delegations in the moment, it is very hard. It's sometimes very, very like you can't stop somebody from saying the wrong thing. You can like correct it afterwards, but it's already out there. So I like the idea of some sort of summary. A template would be great, and understanding like whether or not they support what's being tabled would be great for background management, and more detailed summary than what we get currently would be great. I do think it is beholden on us to not give a public platform to people for bigotry. That's and we like there are definitely people that come to boards with that. So I don't think that requiring a full written statement would actually pass with the current board, because I generally, when I'm talking to other trustees, there's not really support for that, and they see it as a barrier. But I do like the idea of a template. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Dawson, and then Trustee Williams.
Thanks, and through the chair. My personal perspective is that I don't feel that there should be a limitation on the number of delegations. I do like the idea of the 3 minutes each. But what I mainly wanted to say is that, oh, and sorry, I also do support the idea that it must be on the agenda. So I think that would be helpful. But I did want to talk about student delegations specifically, because I did receive some feedback from a teacher after some students delegated to us in the past. And they explained that it was a really stressful process for them. And there were 2 suggestions. So number 1, that we make the student delegation time longer. So is it 8 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? I'm just putting it out there, but a longer time would be appreciated. And then the second piece was, and I don't know if we can do this, but some sort of mechanism to remain anonymous. So if students are calling in, for instance, online, it could be something like, they're called student number 1 or student A or something like that, or just student instead of being actually named. I don't know what the legalities are around that, if it does need to be a matter of public record that they are named, but I do think it's something to consider when there are minors present. And then, a third thing that came to mind is just the potential need for staff supports for students who are delegating and what that could look like, because it is possible that students could be interrogated while on the stand, sort of like that's how it feels to them. So I don't know what supports we can provide for that, but I did want to mention student delegations in particular because I had received that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask you a point of clarification? If the Student Senate has delegations?
Oh, they do. Okay.
No, I wanted to know if you knew that.
I don't know, actually.
Okay. I just asked a question.
I'm not sure. Sorry.
No problem. I think that's worth reporting if we're talking about students. So, but okay, last speaker, Trustee Williams, and then we're going to break for the long weekend. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you through you, Madam Chair. Just a brief comment. It's more to the process and maybe procedures around delegation, like that form about the code of conduct, just like maybe a link to it, a link to our equity policy, maybe an acknowledgement that they've agreed to adhere to the code of conduct and equity policy right on the delegation form. I think having that link maybe give folks the opportunity to even read that information to better inform the expectations when they come to delegate in front of the board. So that's it for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was a really good conversation. I don't think we've landed on almost any of these items yet, but it's been great conversation. And then at the next meeting, my understanding is we'll have kind of a summary of where we're at with the input of those that filled out the survey. And I'm not sure when the expectation is that we still have a couple more meetings before we really need to land where we're going, right? So anyway, thank you, staff, as always, for preparing the deck for us, and to committee members and to the others that took the time to join us. Appreciate it. And to all those that are celebrating Easter, I hope it's a great time and that the Easter Bunny is good to you and your religious observances go well. And for the rest of us, thank you for the long weekend.
And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Trustee McLean, for adjournment, seconded by Trustee King. Thank you for that reminder.